In these next few videos, we're going to explore a concept called looping, and it's a lot easier to understand it if you see it in action first. So let's go ahead and jump to our resource pack directory, and in the logic and functions folder, let's go ahead and open up the fifth step, which is called looping with for each. Go ahead and copy all of the code and paste it over the code that's currently in your test.php file and save it. Now, there are several different types of looping constructs that we can use. This one is fairly simple to use, and it leverages an array, which we've talked about before. So our first line here is a simple array. It has 4 items. We can tell which of the items belongs where because we're just using the words 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next, we're using a control structure called for each, and you can see the structure is very similar to when we used an if statement. We have the name for each, we have opening and closing parentheses, and then we have something happening on the inside we'll come back to in a moment. We have our opening bracket, we have our closing bracket, and then we have some code that we're going to execute in between. Now in an if statement, what happens between these two parentheses is a conditional check. We check to see if something is true. The for each control structure, though, has a different purpose. The idea is that it takes an array, we defined it up here, and notice that we're using it right here, and it will go through each item in the array, and then it will perform this code on that item. The syntax here is that it takes the array as the first parameter, we use the word as, and then we set a variable that we're going to pull a particular item from the array into. So the first time this runs, num will be equal to this first item here. The next time that it runs, it will be equal to the second item. The next time, 3. The next time, 4. Because each of these items are being pulled into the same variable, we can reliably use it in the code inside of these brackets. So the first time this code runs, num will be equal to 1, and so it will print num and then a break, and then it will go through the next item, and num will be equal to 2, and so it will print that and then a break, and so on. When for each gets to the end of an array, it will stop and the code will move on. So let's go ahead and see this in the browser. Make sure test.php is saved, jump back to the browser, and go ahead and refresh it. And you see we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, one thing that we haven't talked about before is the fact that PHP is very fast. So even though we're running through this for each loop 4 times, it happens virtually instantaneously and gets printed to the browser right away. So we're about to look at a couple of additional control structures that we can use for looping. But the idea behind any looping construct is the same. We want to perform the same logic a number of times in a row. Sometimes we'll have a variable set of data that we want to perform those actions on. Sometimes we just want to repeat some logic over and over again a certain number of times. Now, if you don't have your mind totally wrapped around the idea of a loop yet, that's okay. It's a little bit strange if you've never seen it before, but go ahead and play with this a bit. Add some extra code inside of this for each loop and see what you can do with this num variable. You can also modify this array by adding some additional items or changing the items in there and then seeing what happens when it runs through the for each loop.